let's start with just basics, because this is very confusing for a lot of people. How would you define the role of a showrunner?
I think I would define the role of a showrunner as someone who, in every aspect of the creation of the show, keeps the overall vision for it. Like kind of like the founding base for the whole series or show, I think, like this, because you have, especially on series compared to films, for an example, you have so many people coming into the show, leaving the show. You often have a lot of directors, DOPs. You have like a constant change of personnel. So as like to be this key element in the process that constantly knows what went on before and where we're going to, I think I would describe as like the overall role of a showrunner in that sense, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're the one who has to keep it together visually or vision-wise.
Yeah.
1 second, just 1 second, because there's a noise over here. I got to turn it off.
Of course.
That was a long response, but it was a good one. I mean, it's true. You basically, someone's got to, who's there from the beginning to the end, who sees the big picture, basically.
Yeah.
What elements are indispensable for the Bible of any show?
I think what's indispensable for the Bible for a show is basically, it's the overall idea of it. It's the overall theme of it. It's what you deem to be, as a storyteller, the most important part of it, I guess. Like, what made you want to do this? To me, at least, is because it's like, it's the core vision that you need to like both remind yourself, but also remind everyone you're working with constantly. Like, what is the core vision? What is the core theme that you really want to get through? I think that the more visible you can get that in the short Bible as well, just makes it so much easier for everyone you show that to jump on board and to understand, like, what are the basic thoughts, the ideas that created this from the get-go. And that in itself, I mean, can change. It can be a character, or it can be a story element, or it can be themes, but just like trying to line in on like the most important aspect of what drives you.
So it would be like the Bible would have to have, obviously, kind of like a mood board and ideas for everything from wardrobe to characters and the story arc. And
yeah, I mean, if it feels important to you, but I mean, to me, it's always been about characters and trying to convey emotions. It's like trying to convey the core emotions that I want the audience to have when they see it, like, which I also like bind very much to the thematics, like to what's the most important narrative element for me in the show, which I think often comes back to like the characters and the emotions, basically, but also very much like, I think the visuals in a short Bible can really help to, of course, add to these emotions, because often when you just use words, if I write the word red, you can read that and you can see like 1,000 different aspects of red when you imagine it, and especially me being colorblind. I mean, to me, red is something completely different. So of course, then combining it with visuals, with like showing just a wee bit more of what I actually mean, it makes it easier for me to come across with what I find important, I think.
That's a very good point. Yeah, well, I mean, what is red? I mean, the red's different for every single person.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think it's harder to amaze audiences now?
I mean, I don't know if I think it's harder to amaze audiences now than it's been before. I mean, of course, we have right now compared to like 10 years ago, something, we have so much coming out. We have so many shows being made, and it's just more and more and more each day, and more streaming services, more platforms, more of everything. So of course, like the overall competition is harder. And I think what becomes harder day by day is to actually have an audience see your show. Because how do they find it when there's so much coming out at the same time? But I think once you get them to see it, I think it's the same as it's always been, because either you create something that the audience attaches themselves to emotionally, or you don't. And I mean, I've seen so much over the years, and I can still get like totally blown away and drawn in by everything. But I think the big issue right now is to have people find out that the shows you do exist.
Mm-hmm. It's almost more of a, on a marketing problem or an outreach problem on the side of the distributors.
Yeah.
One thing, the camera's shaking a little bit. I think it's when you lean forward, it moves your laptop. I don't know if it's a laptop or a camera thing. Just keep that in mind. And I hear a slight Scottish accent. Is that true from something?
It's not on purpose, but
you hang out with Scottish people.
I've done that quite a lot in the past, and it's just like it's just, I don't know why, it just stays there.
I like it. So do you think there's an American working model for showrunners that's different from show production, that's taking place and kind of building itself on the success of the Nordic model?
I definitely believe there's a difference between the American way of running shows and the Nordic way of running shows, at least to what I've seen and experienced and talked about with writers doing shows in America. Their hierarchy is very strict. I mean, you know exactly where you're placed, and you know exactly what you can do and what you cannot do in this hierarchy. And I think that to some extent makes things very easy to navigate. Whereas we, at least in the Nordics, we're used to have like a very flat hierarchy. I mean, it's often, and it's not just in our business, it's basically, I think, a way of perceiving society. It almost doesn't matter whether you're like a big boss or something, or you just came in from the street. Your opinion opinions are in many ways valued as being worth the same. I really, really like this at the same time as when you're driving a room, when you're like supposed to like drive a room of say 5 writers or something, or like a whole set or whatever, the flat hierarchy can sometimes mean that you have endless discussions. And I think that it makes it like the flat hierarchy makes it easier to be a small writer's room, because everyone involved in this small writer's room takes a lot of responsibility, but it makes it much harder to have a big writer's room because you get so many voices and everyone are heard equally. So I think that we are, at least to my mind, we're still working in the Nordics, and I believe perhaps all of Europe, to find a form of how to do these shows in bigger rooms, and or how to create hierarchies that perhaps don't come natural to us, and how to find our own way of navigating in this. Because there are huge differences, and I think those differences are mainly like down to how our societies are structured in a way.
Yeah, it's sometimes there's something effective about like everyone's clear on who's the leader in a way, or
Yeah.
who's the. But yeah, it does sound like a general comparison of socialism versus high capitalism.
I do believe so in a way, and I'm not really. And I mean, you have, I guess, you have like positives and negatives to each side of it, because I wouldn't like the way that we work together. I wouldn't change that for the world. I love it, but I was also like created in a society where this is the norm. But I think there is definitely something in this like socialistic core that.
Well, it's great everyone gets a voice, but
Exactly.
there's got to be somehow a medium maybe to find a balance.
Yeah.
Everyone gets heard, but also things get done maybe faster.
Yeah.
You know, at some point.
Yeah.
You're currently you know, you're creating the Rain. You've created the Rain. How do you create your team of writers and to bring the chapters to life that you did in the Bible, and in general, how do you, well, let's do that one first and then we'll talk about how you write. But how do you create a team?
When we did the Rain specifically, we were on we had very little time to write. It was something that we also joked a lot with Netflix about, was that when we started, we said to them, what we do in Denmark normally is that we don't have that much time. No, we don't have that many people. We don't have that much money, but we do have a lot of time. And they said, great. And they just took away time. So it was like so I basically, for the Rain, I called up all my friends and colleagues who I'd worked with before, who were showrunners in their own right. And I got them to come in and work with me. So the room was very, like, in a way, some of them were like overqualified for taking that position, but they really wanted to help. And it was the first time I'd worked with a big room. We were 6 writers in the, normally in Denmark before that, it was like 3 writers at the most. And it was super efficient. It was super fun. It was super interesting, but it was also really, really difficult to find like the balance of controlling all of these voices and narrowing it down, making it effective. So basically over the seasons of The Rain and onto the next show that I'm writing now, basically the room has become smaller and smaller, which is also because we're doing not that many episodes, like we're doing 6 to 8 episodes, which is still, it's kind of, it's not that much. So you can actually keep the overview yourself almost. So it becomes more a question of needing to spar with other people. And so sometimes it becomes smaller rooms where you have one writer coming in for one period and then another coming in. So you also have like different perspectives. But I think definitely with the amount of episodes having become fewer, the room also becomes smaller. And the idea of this like big American room with 8 writers and 22 episodes, and it doesn't really make sense when we create such short shows, short seasons.
And what's your writing process for you when you sit down to write?
I mean, I think my writing process always starts with the idea of what I want to convey emotionally. Basically, where I want to start, and more importantly, I think where I want to end. And then I always, quite early in the process, I think I have everything mapped out, and I believe that I know everything that's going to happen. And then once I start writing it, I often find out that I know nothing about nothing, but I still always know where I want to go. Like, where do we want to end up? And basically, I think my writing process is often in the beginning about trying things out. And every time I try things out, I'm very certain that this is the right thing. But sometimes I just stop and go back. Always keep an open mind to inspirations and what I find out along the way. And I know that as long as I know what I want to tell and where I want it to end, and like the themes I want to go through, I find that it's not that difficult to change stuff. I've really found over the years that what's most important for my writing process is not being afraid to change stuff, and believing that if the core is there, the core will always be there, and I will hopefully only get closer to it.
How do you know when it's okay, I gotta change it? You know, if you're like stuck on, how do you deal with being attached to something you wrote and then being just knowing you have to change it as much as you might be attached to it? Is that a hard part of the writing process?
It still is a hard part of the writing process, and I think I still always feel that once I've written something like a draft, I always feel, okay, this is it, this is perfect, this is done. But then the second I press send on, the anxiety starts, and it's like, shit, this is the worst. And then when I get notes on it, when I get response to it, my initial reactions are nearly always, what are you talking about? This is perfect. But then I again often come to the assumption like, okay, let's listen to it. And then I can suddenly almost every time see the script or the story from another perspective, and then I can suddenly see, okay, so I can change this, so I can change that, and I can do this, and I can do that, and then. But it always has to feel, to me at least, the writing process always has to feel easy. If it's not easy to write, I know there's something wrong, because then I know that when it feels difficult to write, it's because I don't know where I'm going. And I need to know where I'm going to be able to write it. And if I don't know where I'm going, then I have to start over.
Interesting. I like that idea. I mean, it's a good guide. You know, if it's too hard, something's wrong, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Okay. We assume that there are many things that are released that are not used, other things that are, until you get to what serves you to dramatically score what was happening. Are there many discards?
Yes, quite a lot. I mean, there are, in the writing process, I think you need to get used to that there's so much you end up not using. There's so much you end up not doing. There's so many directions you end up not going. And it's like, sometimes you leave like entire universes and storylines and characters and everything. You leave them behind in the process because you find that that is not where you're going. I think a lot of the writing process from start to finish is about simplifying. It's about like throwing ideas out, trying to get to the core of the story. So a lot is left behind, and that keeps on until post, like until the editing is done. Because even, at least to my experience, even when you sit with the episodes and you're editing them, you also take away a lot of stuff. So it's like, from the get-go, it's all about like narrowing it down to like the most simple, the most like core subjects that you need for the episodes or the season overall to work. And of course, sometimes you said afterwards, you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have taken that away. I've removed something that now seems irreplaceable, but that is also, I think, a kind of part of the process. And hopefully you learn more and more as you get more experienced, as you get older, like what is actually too important to not just throw away.
Yeah, it's about learning to let go. It sounds like. And I think what you're saying is that a good kind of rule of thumb is less is more, right?
Yeah.
I mean, paring it down to the basics or the most crucial is sometimes more beneficial.
Totally. I believe so.
So what are the main challenges when creating a new show? Do these change according to what platform you're working for, whether it be, Netflix or HBO or Amazon?
I think like when you're doing a new show, it of course, like the process depends very much on who you're doing it with and the relationships you build with people. I think it's always like the creative process, always any process, I think, is always easier when you have good relationships with the people that you work with. Like the more that you feel trust, I think the better your work will be. And of course, also the more you trust who you work with, the better the overall process will be. We were used to, in Denmark before, we were usually used to like very long very long periods where we wrote for a long time in different stages, and in all these stages we had to get like a yay or nay to keep on working. So basically writing a feature film in Denmark, which might be normal actually around, like, it can take 3 years, it can take 4 years until you get the green light. And on the way in that process, I find that sometimes you forget what it was you actually wanted with it, because it takes so long time. So like the initial energy of it and the importance of it kind of fades away, and it becomes more of like a chore, like something that just, whereas at least what we found with working with Netflix, for example, was that they came in with this, okay, we want to do it and we want to do it now. And as I said earlier, we had no time, but it was at the same time as it was, of course, like super stressful in all sorts of ways. It was brilliant because you just like, you work on that energy where everyone still feels excited about it. Like everyone is still like going like, let's go. Whereas no one has really had the chance to get tired. Of course, when you reach the end of the process, you're very tired, but you create it on the energy that the initial idea was created on. And I've really, really, really enjoyed working like that. It's also it's a super privileged way of working. Whereas normally in Denmark, we don't work that way. And I think that most people perhaps don't work that way because, of course, you have normally, like, you have a lot of stepping stones. Also, when you create shows that have many different investors, you also have many different processes and many different people that you need to talk to. Whereas we, with Netflix, for example, we talk with 2 people, and they were like the gatekeepers for everything. So it became a very close relationship, a very intimate process. And I do feel overall that the closer you feel to the people you are working for and working with, the better the overall process will be, because the road of communication is so much shorter.
Sounds like one of the biggest challenges just keeping momentum and keeping your eye on the prize, keeping why you even wanted to do this, the passion for it there.
Yeah.
Therefore, if it's fast tracked because of time constraints or the pressure's on, then it's easier. It's easier to do, even if you lose the luxury of not having to be stressed out about it. And of course,
totally. And I think that very much comes back to actually what we talked about in the beginning about like the most important part of like show running, or what you call it, constantly keeping an eye on like the core vision of it. And I think the more it drags out, the more time you spend on actually getting it made, the more you potentially at least lose sight of the core vision of it.
Yeah, that's what's great, I think, with having, obviously 100% backers, and that, that you're not, one of the longest processes is getting a project off the ground.
Yes.
Finding someone interested, pitching it. And like you say, that can take 3-4 years. So,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that. Which character, okay, then we're getting into what things you like. Which character has moved you the most to see him come to life in a show of yours?
In a show that I've done, or just like
Yeah, in yours.
Cool. I think for the Rain, which character moved me the most to see come to life, or like to follow process of was, I think, the role of the brother in the rain called Rasmus, which I think was basically also because things like blend together with, take the actor who plays Rasmus, Lucas, who was a boy of 16 doing his first real part, being thrusted into this, we found out as it came out into the world, to this like huge show that had a lot of like audiences from all over the world, and he just got catapulted into being this person that they all followed on Instagram and just fell in love with, and seeing how that in many ways only affected him positively, like in good ways, because he actually just kept his feet on the ground. And that has been so super cool about it. We've talked a lot about it, and I think that kind of seeped into his character as well. And watching that character grow at the same time as we watched him grow as an actor, I think that process was just a beautiful thing to be a part of. I think also because like all that we could be afraid of, like how this affects a young man like that. He was so good at it and so professional at the same time, and it was just nice to be able to create his character and his character's process along with him, and doing that for a number of seasons. And basically, like it was like doing that with all the actors and their roles, being able to tell a story with them, especially with Rasmus and Simone, the two leads, the siblings, like to get the chance to follow that story through to the end was just amazing. I'm very grateful for that.
It's interesting, with, I think it must be happening more and more with, social media and what you were saying, like when a character becomes beloved, with the audiences, and how that, is that affecting even like story writing in a way? Just in terms of like, you can see that, not that you give them more lines, but that it would somehow affect any of the story arc.
I think I would be hesitant to let interactions on social media affect too much what you want to do with characters as a whole in the story. What I'm most affected about, I think, with the actors and the characters is to find out, like, because one thing is that you can create characters and you have this theoretical idea of how they will be, what they will sound like, how they will work. And then once you see the actors taking on the characters, becoming them, it's just so inspiring to the process. And I've often been in a state where a character that I thought would just be like a really small throwaway role, and then once you suddenly see the actor or actress doing it, you just get inspired and just want to see more. So I try to keep an open mind, because I know that of course, with the big arcs, with the big main characters and all that, I know where we're going, but at the same time, trying to be open, because you never know, like, what will the character be like in the end with this certain actor actress doing it, and also like how will the overall group like how will it feel, how will they feel together, and that affects a lot as well, I think.
Yeah, the chemistry, you mean, between the actors, actually. Yeah,
exactly.
Do the characters evolve with the seasons? We kind of covered that. Is this something that's already planned in advance by the showrunner, or is that affected by the reception of the audience and the work of the actor itself? I think we just answered that. So what current or past shows are the most interesting to you, and for what reason? Not necessarily yours in this case, in this question.
I think the show that has inspired me most in like recent times, or what you call it, perhaps it's not that recent anymore, actually, is a show called The Leftovers, which I basically was blown away by, mostly because I found that it was so interesting to me and inspiring to me that a writer like, at least to me, it seemed like that a writer like Damon Lindelof, who did Lost and who did a lot of stuff where people got angry at him for only asking questions and never coming up with answers that at least the audience were satisfied with. He basically went out and did a show where, like in the first episode of The Leftovers, you as an audience are told you will never know, you will never find out like what actually went on, because it's not about this. This show is actually about people always trying to understand, people always trying to find answers to the questions that just can't be answered, and how we are looking to religion and superstition and all sorts of stuff to answer these questions that will never be answered. And that show from start to end just really, I mean, I loved it, and I found it amazing as a work in itself, at the same time as I just found it like it was a perfect answer to all to the reactions he got from doing Lost, where so many were, at least on the internet, were pissed off about not getting the answers that they felt they deserved. So that show has been super inspiring.
Yeah, it sounds like you admired his chutzpah to stick with it, you know, in terms of, I'm not going to back down here and give you something easy.
No, totally. And at the same time, there was this creator, Jason Katims, who did both Friday Night Lights, and he did a show called Parenthood, which I've rarely experienced shows, because I mean, Parenthood is in many ways, at least when you look at it from the outside, like a standard network drama, a lot of soapy feelings, like it's just a whole family story. But I've never, I think, before or after that, experienced a show where I feel I'm part of it. I am part of this family. And when the show ends, I mean, I was crying my eyes out, because I knew that this was like the end of the line with these people. And I know that sometimes shows that are so blatantly pathos, I mean, they're so blatantly going for emotions, and they can almost feel manipulative sometimes. And I guess you can look down on it, but to me, I'm amazed and inspired by when I can feel that what the creators want me to feel, I feel it. It totally works. I'm there. I cry and I laugh, and I feel so much for these characters, and I think like that no matter what genre you do, and if you're like super arty or super mainstream or whatever, I guess that's just what you want. I mean, you want the audience to get the exact emotions you want them to have. And I'm amazed, like for an example, with a show like Parenthood, that it really feels they can just do that. And I could just have kept on seeing season after season with just these people being them.
Yeah, I think you're right that like pathos and sappy shows kind of get a bad rap, but what people I think forget is it is hard to do that.
It's super hard.
It is actually hard to suck someone in that much.
Yeah.
That they identify so strongly, that they, they feel a part of it, that they, attached to the characters.
Totally.
Mm. What do you foresee the evolution of the figure of the showrunner with so much platform consumption? Like, where do you think it's going? Showrunners, because it seems to me there is going to be a shift, or it is shifting, and it definitely has shifted from the past.
Yeah, I think that right now the role of the showrunner is like basically what we talked about earlier, also with the difference between America and Europe, at least the Nordics, and it's a role that's constantly up for discussion, I think. And also, like, I don't feel like we've defined it as much in Europe as it's been defined in the States. So I think we're still working on that. We're still working on defining the role as such. But it's also, I think, in a way, it seems like with the amount of shows being made, the processes also becomes more and more varied. So I think actually the role will also change more and more for each project or for each process, because everything still seems open. Like, it doesn't really feel like there's a system to it as such, if at least not here. So we're trying to create a system at the same time as the system is like shaking in its core, because when so much is going on, I think you try so many different directions. So I think in a way that means that the role of a showrunner will branch out and mean more and more different things. I think you will always need someone who is like the bearer of the core mission, who stays there from start to end. That could be one person or two people or whatever, but you need that to make sure that there is a consistency to do it all. So in that way, it might actually stay the same, but like, who is the showrunner and like what position do they have besides that? Because I mean, the whole concept of the showrunner is also something, it feels more like something we call it, but it's not like a real title. It's just like this vague idea of like, there needs to be some kind of captain of the ship.
There needs to be someone running this show.
Exactly. Exactly. So in many ways, I think that the core idea of that will stay, but everything around it will change, which means also that who has this role and why and what do they do and how do they do it and all of that. I think that is very much up for discussion and is like an ever-changing thing in the process.
Well, thank you, JANNIK, for spilling your guts and also enlightening us with a lot, all the experience you have. I hope to see you here in Sitges, at some point in the future. And is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. No.
No, I think it was pretty complete. Thank you so much for taking the time. Again, my name is Alicia.
Thank you.
Have a great time. Okay, ciao.